What does it practically look like to rewire our brains sexually? Like what habits, tools, exercises can we implement to do that?
This is a great question because we could actually come up with a huge long list of things that would be helpful. And this also is one of those areas where, give yourself grace and time because all of this is going to take time to create new habits. It just, whether you subscribe to the 21 day, to the 30 day, to the year long, whatever people say that it takes to create a new habit, just give yourself all the time that you need.
Treat it like you're learning how to ride a bike. Do you remember how awful and awkward and weird that was? How many times you fell and scraped your knee and trauma.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes. Okay. I would say that probably one of the best tools or the best things that you can do for yourself is to have awareness, just awareness of how you're feeling about things and being able to sit in that. Because when it comes to addiction recovery, our brain isn't just compulsive about one thing. It seems to run on a compulsive loop. And whether it's that I feel this way, so I need to do this immediately. It really is training yourself to be aware of when you're feeling compulsive and sit in it for a while. And I remember this being something when I was coming out of my eating disorder treatment. And I remember being one day at the college and my brain was saying, you have to do this today. You have to do this today. You have to do this today. And I got in my car because I was leaving campus and I got in my car and I sat there for a minute and I said to myself, what if I don't do it today? And this is what I had learned through counseling and therapy was to kind of push back on that a little bit and say, what happens if I don't do this today? And it's a million of those self conversations that you have to say, if I don't do this today, this will happen. But if I do it tomorrow, this will happen. And it really is giving yourself that choice, I think is huge in recovery. And then, of course, it's all the other things that we always know about. It's sleep and eating well and getting exercise and spending time in prayer and meditating on scripture. Those things right there, even just our thoughts, they rewire our brain in ways that I don't know if scientists will ever understand. But there's research to support that every time that we think something new, every time that we do something different, it's creating a brand new neural pathway in our brain, which should be so exciting. And a lot of times you can even test this. Like most of us drive home the same way from work every single day. But if you're feeling a little bit dicey, go a different way and watch how your brain responds to it, because it won't be something like you mentioned early on, that it won't be something that's automatic. You'll actually have to think about the direction you're going and how you're going to get home, and it will change your brain. It's those type of things that we do intentionally over and over and over again so that we can create new, strong neural pathways in our brain. And then tools like the 3 circles. The 3 circles is a great tool. And I know that we use that in our resources, but I've also talked to counselors who they use those every week with their client. So instead of using a faster scale every week, they're using a 3 circles every week to just kind of have a realistic plan that this is how I'm going to maintain sobriety, and these are going to be the things that I'm going to work on that are going to be healthy for me. Also, we have on our tools page, we have the sobriety plan that says for me to be physically healthy, I need to do this every day or once a week or whatever it is. For me to be emotionally healthy, I need this. For me to be spiritually healthy, I need this. And so just having a plan like that, I think is really helpful. In some of our curriculum, we have people make a list of 10 things that you can do right now. So when your brain is tempting you to go back to some of those unhealthy behaviors, it's what can I do right now that doesn't rely on anybody else? It could be day or night. These are my 10 things. These are my go-tos that are going to help me disrupt my previous pattern and create a new pattern, so to speak. It's dozens of these kind of tools that really that we need to put in place every single day that are going to help us to rewire our brain.
Yeah, I think what we want to acknowledge is any tools that I'm using to develop sobriety from my addiction and to move towards sexual health are helping rewire my brain sexually. because like Heather said, and we've said many times, sexual addiction is not about sex. And so sex isn't what fixes you. It's all these tools you're using to develop a healthier mindset, a renewed mind, a healthier way of viewing relationships and valuing other people and respecting their boundaries. I mean, all of that in the end will help. And I'm so glad you mentioned the 3 circles, because I think we could look at our 3 circles through that lens, if we're married, of our marriage sexuality. And maybe we define a relapse as something like, I'm not ever going to pressure my wife to have sex to meet my needs. That's just not how I want to view my sexuality anymore. Well, if we consider that like a middle circle thing, then what would the inner circle be? What are the ways that we realize we start to try to coerce or get them, to say yes, even though we can tell they really don't want to? And what does healthy boundaries look like? What would it look like to do healthy things instead and invest in the relationship? And like what I would say, an outer circle tool that in this area can really help is that commitment to dating your spouse, to being their friend, to doing things you just enjoy that don't have to lead to sex at all, but are just learning to enjoy the person that you're married to beyond the sexual connection. And then if that physical outcome happens, great. But the goal is really relearning what the foundation of a relationship is, because I think some of us in our unhealth have made sex the foundation of the relationship, and it's not. And so using a tool like that is great. I think also practicing the habit of gratitude that we've talked about a lot on this podcast for other reasons, but the way that sexual dysfunction and I think our addiction can cause us to be more focused on what our spouse is not. How come they're not more this? How come they didn't do this? How come they're not, more willing for that, or what I've seen or heard from other people? And all of that is really putting our spouse in a negative light, and our brain is learning from it. And then there's this phenomenon where we start to see more of what we're looking for. And if we're looking negative, we find negative. But the reverse is also true, that if we're looking positive and thinking positive, and maybe even right now your relationship is in a really, really bad place, but you could start with some gratitude of, my spouse is still here. Okay, let's focus on that every morning. Just write a little prayer and thank God that your spouse is still here. Maybe your spouse is still willing to engage sexually at some level. Like, make that part of the gratitude, that every day you're just looking for, what can I appreciate about my spouse? And over time, you find your brain will find more of what it's looking for in a healthy way. And I think that retrains the brain not to see my spouse as this sexual object that needs to meet my needs, but to see my spouse as this person that I have gratitude for, and then out of gratitude, moving towards them for healthy purposes and not just meeting my needs. So I think tools like that we've talked about for so many other reasons, just take them and ask, well, how could I apply this to rewiring? There we go.
I told you.
Rewiring my brain sexually.
There you go. I got nothing to add. I just keep thinking about that person who takes a different way home today and is like an hour late. Their spouse is like, what were you doing?
It's the Pure Desire podcast.
Heather told me to take a new way
I'm terrible
home.
at direction. Have Google Maps ready.
I drove an hour down the road and an hour back. I just was trying something new. That's it. That's all I had to add to that one. Go ahead.
Okay, so Heather, we've, I think, talked a lot in this episode about the perspective, maybe mainly from the addicted spouse, the one who's trying to overcome addiction, relearn new patterns. But there's also a reality for the betrayed spouse that they maybe need to relearn new patterns. And obviously, this doesn't apply to the spouse that is separated or doesn't know if the marriage is going to make it. And maybe that's a wise decision because of safety issues. And I mean, just